6 Signs of a Stupid Person. Stupid philosophically. In my 20 years of observing human behavior and studying Stoic philosophy, I've noticed something fascinating about intelligence and foolishness. You see, true intelligence isn't just about how much you know, it's about how you live, how you treat others, and most importantly, how well you learn from your mistakes. But here's what's really interesting. There are 6 undeniable signs that reveal when someone is lacking in wisdom. And trust me, these signs are everywhere. In our workplaces, our relationships, even in our own behavior sometimes. I know what you're thinking, not another list about intelligence. But this isn't just any list. This is about understanding the subtle patterns that hold us back from reaching our full potential. Patterns that might be affecting your life right now without you even realizing it. You see, in today's fast-paced world, we're all trying to prove how smart we are. But what if I told you that the very things we think make us look intelligent are actually holding us back? What if our own habits are secretly sabotaging our growth? Here's why this matters. Every day, I see brilliant people making these exact mistakes. Successful professionals, talented leaders, good parents, all stumbling because they can't recognize these simple but crucial signs. By the end of this video, you'll not only be able to spot these signs in others, but more importantly, you'll have the tools to identify and correct them in yourself. You'll understand exactly how to avoid these common pitfalls and start making better decisions in your professional and personal life. This isn't just theory. This is practical wisdom backed by both ancient Stoic philosophy and modern psychology. Wisdom that you can start applying today to transform your relationships, advance your career, and deepen your understanding of yourself and others. Before we dive in, I'm curious. How many of these signs do you think you might recognize in yourself? Drop a 7 in the comments if you're brave enough to learn about yourself, an 8 if you're here to understand others better, or a 9 if you're already suspecting someone specific while watching this. Ready to begin this journey of discovery? Let's start with the first sign, one that might hit closer to home than you expect. 1. A closed mind. The fortress of ignorance. You know what's fascinating about close-minded people? They build fortresses of certainty around themselves, thinking they're creating safety. But these walls they build, they're actually prison bars. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." And nowhere is this more evident than in the story I'm about to share. Let me tell you about Mark, a department manager I worked with at a major tech company in Manhattan. Mark had been running his team the same way for 10 years. Every morning, the same paper reports. Every week, the same manual processes. Every quarter, the same outdated metrics. One day, Sarah, a new team member fresh from a successful startup, proposed implementing modern project management software. Her eyes lit up as she explained how it could cut report preparation time by 70% and give real-time insights into team performance. But Mark's response? "We've always done it this way, and it works fine." The same response he'd given to every suggestion for change over the past decade. Seneca warns us. The greatest obstacle to living is expectancy, which hangs upon tomorrow and loses today. This was Mark's tragedy, so focused on preserving his comfortable past that he couldn't see his team crumbling in the present. You see, while Mark's team was spending hours manually compiling reports, other departments were using automation to focus on innovation and growth. Their productivity soared, their teams expanded. Meanwhile, Mark's once stellar department began falling behind. The real cost? It wasn't just about efficiency. I watched as talented team members, feeling stifled and unheard, started leaving. First Sarah, then others. Each departure taking with them not just skills, but also the energy and fresh perspectives that could have revitalized the team. Here's what's truly ironic about a closed mind. It often comes disguised as experience. I've been doing this for 20 years, people like Mark say. But as Epictetus teaches us, it is impossible for a person to begin to learn what they think they already know. Think about it. How many times have you dismissed an idea simply because it challenged your comfortable way of doing things? When was the last time you genuinely considered a perspective that contradicted your own? The problem with a closed mind isn't just that it rejects new ideas, it's that it creates a feedback loop of confirmation bias. Every success becomes proof that change is unnecessary. Every failure gets blamed on external factors rather than prompting self-reflection. But here's the good news. A closed mind isn't a permanent condition. It's a habit, and like any habit, it can be broken. The key lies in practicing what the Stoics called cognitive humility. The understanding that our knowledge is always incomplete. Want to break free from this fortress of ignorance? Start small. Next time someone suggests an idea that makes you uncomfortable, resist the urge to dismiss it immediately. Instead, ask yourself, what if they're seeing something I'm not? Try this practical exercise. Each week, deliberately seek out one perspective that challenges your current beliefs about your work, your relationships, or your view of the world. Don't judge it immediately, just sit with it. Examine it, let it teach you something new. Remember, true confidence isn't about knowing everything. It's about being secure enough to admit when you don't know something. As Marcus Aurelius reminds us, the first rule is to keep an untroubled spirit. The second is to look things in the face and know them for what they are. By the way, remember Mark? 6 months after Sarah left, his department's performance had dropped so significantly that upper management stepped in. The new systems were implemented anyway, but by then he'd lost his best people and his reputation as a leader. The lesson? A closed mind is like a locked door. It might keep out what you fear, but it also keeps out what you need. So, ask yourself, are you building walls or bridges in your mind? Are you protecting your knowledge or preventing your growth? Because here's the truth that Stoic philosophy teaches us. The most dangerous prison isn't the one that holds your body, it's the one that holds your mind. And speaking of prisons we build for ourselves, let's talk about the second sign of a foolish person. One that might be even more damaging than a closed mind. The habit of constant blaming. Sign 2, constant blaming, the shield that becomes a prison. Have you ever noticed how some people have an extraordinary talent? A talent for making sure nothing is ever their fault. Every failure has an excuse. Every mistake has someone else's name on it. Every setback comes with a ready-made story about why they're the victim. But here's what's fascinating. This constant blaming isn't just a habit. It's a prison they've built for themselves, brick by brick, excuse by excuse. The great Stoic philosopher Epictetus once said, "When you blame others, you give up your power to change." These words, written nearly 2,000 years ago, cut right to the heart of what we're discussing today. Let me tell you about Lisa, an event organizer I worked with at a major corporation. She was brilliant, creative, and had an impressive track record. But she had one fatal flaw. She was a master of blame. When a high-profile conference she was organizing failed to meet attendance targets, Lisa immediately pointed fingers. The marketing team didn't promote it properly, the venue wasn't prestigious enough, the timing wasn't right, the budget was too small. But here's what really happened, and I know because I was part of the post-mortem team. Lisa had missed crucial deadlines for sending event details to marketing. She'd ignored warnings about competing events on the same date. She'd dismissed suggestions about ticket pricing. Yet, even when presented with these facts, Lisa couldn't, or wouldn't, see her role in the outcome. As Seneca wisely observed, the person who blames everyone else takes away their own opportunity to learn. You might be thinking, but sometimes things really aren't our fault, right? And you're absolutely correct. Marcus Aurelius addressed this when he wrote, "The art of living is more like wrestling than dancing." Be ready, stand firm, and be prepared for what comes without warning. The key isn't about taking blame for everything. It's about taking responsibility for what you can control. This is where many people get stuck. They confuse accountability with culpability. Think about it. When was the last time you caught yourself making an excuse? What was your immediate reaction the last time something went wrong? Did you instinctively look for someone or something to blame? Here's the crucial difference. Blaming asks, whose fault is this? While responsibility asks, what can I learn from this? One locks you in place. The other moves you forward. I learned this lesson myself the hard way. Early in my career, I was managing a team project that fell behind schedule. My first instinct? Blame my team's lack of commitment. But a wise mentor pulled me aside and asked one simple question. What could you have done differently? That question changed everything. It shifted my focus from finding fault to finding solutions. So how do we break free from this prison of blame? Here are 3 practical steps I've seen work time and time again. First, practice the 24-hour rule. When something goes wrong, wait 24 hours before assigning blame. Use this time to analyze what happened objectively. Second, ask yourself, what's my role in this outcome? Not to blame yourself, but to understand your sphere of influence. Third, replace who's at fault with what can we learn? This simple shift in language can transform your entire approach to problems. But here's what makes this particularly challenging in today's world. We're surrounded by a culture of blame. Social media, news outlets, even our workplace environments often encourage us to point fingers rather than take responsibility. Remember Lisa? A year after the failed conference, she was passed over for a promotion. The feedback was clear. Her inability to take ownership of outcomes had damaged her credibility with both her team and senior management. The most painful part? She blamed that too on office politics, on favoritism, on everything except the one thing she could actually control, her own response to challenges. As Epictetus reminds us, it's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. So here's your challenge. The next time something goes wrong, and trust me, something will go wrong, pause before you blame. Ask yourself, am I using blame as a shield? And if so, what am I really protecting myself from? Because here's the truth about constant blaming. It might feel like a shield, protecting you from pain and failure, but it's actually a prison, keeping you locked in patterns that prevent growth and learning. The choice is yours. You can stay protected in your prison of blame, or you can step into the uncertainty of responsibility and growth. As Marcus Aurelius said, the impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. And speaking of impediments to growth, this brings us to our next sign, one that often goes hand in hand with blame: arrogance over humility. But before we move on, take a moment to reflect. How many times today have you caught yourself making excuses? The answer might surprise you. Arrogance over humility. ARROGANCE over the depths of hell campaign. Adius held the loudest voice in an empty room. Have you ever met someone who just has to be the smartest person in every room? You know the type. They interrupt constantly, dismiss others' ideas, and somehow manage to turn every conversation into a showcase of their supposed brilliance. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The first rule is to keep an untroubled spirit. The second is to look things in the face and know them for what they are." Yet in today's world, we often see the opposite, troubled spirits masquerading as supreme confidence. Let me tell you about Michael, a senior manager I encountered during my consulting years at a major tech firm in Manhattan. Here was a man who embodied what Seneca warned us about: the person who knows everything learns nothing. Michael had an impressive track record, Harvard MBA, successful projects under his belt, and a reputation for being brilliantly difficult. In every meeting, he'd dominate the conversation, cutting off even seasoned team members mid-sentence. His favorite phrase? "Actually, let me explain why that won't work." But here's where it gets interesting. The company was facing a critical project, a $50 million software implementation that could either transform their business or become a costly failure. Michael was put in charge, and true to form, he approached it with his trademark arrogance. When junior developers raised concerns about the system architecture, he dismissed them. "I've done this a dozen times," he'd say, waving away their warnings. When the QA team requested additional testing time, he called it unnecessary hand-holding. Epictetus teaches us it is impossible for a man to learn what he thinks he already knows. Michael was living proof of this ancient wisdom. The project began to show cracks. Critical bugs emerged, client feedback was ignored, team morale plummeted. But Michael remained convinced of his infallibility, blaming everything and everyone except his own approach. Here's the turning point, and pay attention, because this is where real wisdom emerges. The project eventually failed spectacularly during a live demo to the board. In that moment, Michael faced a choice that we all face when our arrogance is challenged by reality: double down or wake up. Surprisingly, he chose to wake up. In a moment of rare vulnerability he later shared with me, I realized my certainty was actually my biggest weakness. Every time I shut down an idea, I was actually shutting down an opportunity to learn. This brings us to a crucial understanding about arrogance versus humility. You see, arrogance isn't just about being overconfident, it's about being afraid. Afraid of being wrong, afraid of looking foolish, afraid of losing control. As Seneca wisely noted, the road to wisdom is paved with humility. But here's what most people get wrong about humility. It's not about thinking less of yourself, it's about thinking of yourself less. Let me give you some practical steps to recognize and overcome arrogance. 1. Practice the two-question rule. Before dismissing any idea, ask yourself, what if I'm wrong? What could I learn here? 2. Implement the silent timer. In meetings, challenge yourself to listen for 5 minutes before speaking. You'll be amazed at what you hear when you're not planning your next brilliant comment. 3. Adopt what I call the reverse expertise principle. The more you know about a subject, the more carefully you should listen to beginners. They often see what experts have become blind to. But here's the real secret, and I learned this from watching Michael's transformation. True confidence doesn't come from knowing everything, it comes from being okay with not knowing. Think about the truly great leaders you've known. Weren't they the ones who could say, "I don't know," without feeling diminished? The ones who could change their minds when presented with new evidence? Ask yourself, when was the last time you admitted to being wrong? When did you last learn something significant from someone you initially dismissed? Remember this: every time you choose humility over arrogance, you're not showing weakness, you're showing wisdom. Every time you listen instead of lecture, you're not losing authority, you're gaining insight. As we wrap up this section, consider this final thought from Marcus Aurelius. The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. What color are you choosing? The harsh glare of arrogance or the rich depth of humility? The choice is yours, but remember, the loudest voice in the room is often the one that needs to prove something. True wisdom, like deep water, runs quiet. But arrogance isn't just about how we see ourselves. It profoundly affects how we connect with others, which brings us to our next sign: the inability to truly understand and empathize with those around us. Let me know in the comments if you've ever encountered someone like Michael, or better yet, if you've ever been Michael. Sometimes recognizing ourselves in these stories is the first step toward change that's around us. Lack of empathy, the blind spot of intelligence. Let me share with you the fourth sign of a foolish person: a lack of empathy. And believe me, this might be the most dangerous blind spot of them all. Have you ever met someone who seemed brilliant on paper, but couldn't understand why their relationships kept falling apart? Or maybe you've worked with that manager who could quote every business strategy book, but couldn't read a room to save their life. I'll tell you something that took me years to learn. Intelligence without empathy is like a ship without a compass. Impressive, but ultimately lost. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Whenever you are about to find fault with someone, ask yourself the following question: What fault of mine most nearly resembles the one I am about to criticize? This profound insight gets to the heart of what we're discussing today. Let me tell you about Paul, a colleague I worked with at a major consulting firm. On paper, he was brilliant. Harvard MBA, stellar track record, the kind of person who could solve complex problems in minutes. But there was something missing, something that would ultimately cost him everything he worked for. One day, our team member Susan missed a crucial deadline. Paul, in his typical fashion, didn't hesitate to criticize her publicly during our morning meeting. "This is unacceptable," he declared, his voice sharp with contempt. "We can't afford to carry dead weight on this project." What Paul didn't know, what he never bothered to find out, was that Susan had spent the previous week in and out of hospitals with her seriously ill son. She'd been working through sleepless nights, trying desperately to balance her responsibilities as a mother and a professional. Seneca teaches us that wherever there is a human being, there is an opportunity for kindness. But Paul had forgotten this fundamental truth. Or perhaps he'd never learned it at all. The irony of this story: a year later, Paul found himself in a similar situation when his mother fell ill. Suddenly, he understood what it meant to juggle personal crisis with professional obligations. The experience transformed him, but at what cost? You see, lack of empathy isn't just about being cold or unsympathetic. It's a form of intellectual blindness that prevents us from seeing the full picture. Think about it. How can you truly solve a problem if you don't understand all its dimensions, including the human element? Epictetus reminds us, don't just say you have read books. Show that through them you have learned to think better, to be a more discriminating and reflective person. This applies perfectly to empathy. It's not enough to know about it, we must practice it. But here's the crucial question: how do we develop this essential quality? How do we bridge the gap between intellectual understanding and emotional intelligence? First, practice active listening. Next time someone speaks to you, try to understand not just their words, but their underlying emotions and needs. Don't just wait for your turn to speak. Truly listen. Second, challenge your assumptions. When someone acts in a way you don't understand, ask yourself, what might be happening in their life that I don't know about? Third, develop what I call perspective agility, the ability to quickly shift between different viewpoints. Before making any judgment, try to see the situation from at least 3 different perspectives. I've seen this transformation happen countless times. Another colleague, David, was known for his brilliant technical solutions but poor team relationships. He started practicing these techniques, and within months not only did his team's performance improve, but their innovation rate doubled. Why? Because when people feel understood, they bring their whole selves to work. Remember, empathy isn't just about being nice, it's about being effective. In today's interconnected world, your success depends not just on what you know, but on how well you understand and connect with others. The Stoics understood something profound. True intelligence encompasses both mind and heart. As Marcus Aurelius said, the soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. When we choose empathy, we choose wisdom. Speaking of wisdom, let me ask you this. When was the last time you made a judgment about someone without knowing their full story? Think about that for a moment. But perhaps even more dangerous than lacking empathy is our next sign, one that keeps us trapped in patterns that no longer serve us. Remember, understanding others isn't just about being kind, it's about being wise. In the end, empathy isn't a soft skill, it's the foundation of true intelligence. Sign 5. Fear of change. The comfort zone prison. The comfort zone. It feels like a warm blanket on a cold winter morning. Safe, familiar, predictable. But what if I told you that this cozy space you've created is actually a prison? A prison that's slowly suffocating your potential, your dreams, and your growth. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The impediment to action advances action." What stands in the way becomes the way. These words echo powerfully when we consider our relationship with change. Let me share a story that deeply resonates with this fifth sign of foolishness, the fear of change. I once knew a brilliant software engineer named Michael. For 15 years he worked at the same company, sat at the same desk, wrote code in the same language. When cloud computing emerged and his company announced a digital transformation, Michael's world began to crumble. "I've mastered this system," he'd say, clutching to his familiar codebase like a lifeline. Why fix what isn't broken? But here's what Michael couldn't see. While he was standing still, the world was sprinting forward. Seneca teaches us, life is like a play. It's not the length, but the excellence of the acting that matters. Yet how many of us are merely reading the same script over and over, afraid to take on a new role? Michael's resistance wasn't unique. I've seen this pattern repeat in countless professionals: the marketing executive who refuses to embrace digital platforms, the teacher who rejects modern teaching methods, the manager who clings to outdated leadership styles. The comfort zone becomes their fortress, but also their prison. Think about it. When was the last time you deliberately stepped outside your comfort zone? When did you last feel that exhilarating mix of fear and excitement that comes with trying something new? Epictetus provides profound insight here. It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. Michael's story took an interesting turn when his company mandated the transition to cloud computing. Initially, he considered quitting, but something remarkable happened during a conversation we had over coffee. "What if," I asked him, "your resistance to change isn't protecting your expertise, but preventing your evolution?" This question sparked a transformation. Michael began to see his situation through a different lens. Instead of viewing change as a threat to his identity, he started seeing it as an opportunity for growth. He enrolled in cloud computing courses, joined online communities, and gradually embraced the transformation. But here's the crucial part. The change wasn't just about learning new technology, it was about shifting his mindset. As Marcus Aurelius reminds us, the universe is change. Our life is what our thoughts make it. Within 6 months, Michael wasn't just adapting to change, he was leading it. He became the bridge between the old and new systems, helping other resistant colleagues navigate the transition. His value to the company didn't diminish, it multiplied. This brings us to a vital truth about the fear of change. It's not really about the change itself. It's about our relationship with uncertainty. When we resist change, we're not protecting our comfort, we're protecting our illusion of control. Here's what I've learned in my years studying Stoic philosophy and human behavior. The most dangerous prison isn't the one with bars, it's the one with comfortable furniture. It's the prison we build ourselves, brick by brick, with our fears and excuses. So how do we break free? Start small. Challenge yourself daily. Take that course you've been postponing. Speak up in that meeting where you usually stay silent. Apply for that position that feels slightly out of reach. Remember what Seneca said: "If one does not know to which port one is sailing, no wind is favorable." The antidote to the fear of change isn't fearlessness, it's courage. Courage isn't the absence of fear, it's the understanding that something else is more important than fear. Let me be clear, this isn't about change for change's sake. It's about staying adaptable, remaining relevant, and continuing to grow. In today's rapidly evolving world, the ability to adapt isn't just an advantage, it's a necessity for survival. Every time you feel the urge to retreat to your comfort zone, ask yourself, is this choice serving my growth or my fear? Because here's the truth, the comfort zone is a beautiful place, but nothing ever grows there. Remember Michael's story. Today he leads his company's cloud transformation initiatives, earning more than ever and, more importantly, feeling more alive than he has in years. The prison of his comfort zone became the launching pad for his greatest professional adventure. As we prepare to explore our final sign of foolishness, ask yourself, what change have you been resisting? What growth have you been postponing? Because sometimes the biggest act of foolishness isn't making mistakes, it's refusing to grow from them. The comfort zone may feel safe, but life's richest rewards lie on the other side of that safety. Are you ready to break free? Speaking of breaking free, let's explore our final sign, one that might be the most revealing of all. Sign 6. Talking more than listening. The silent teacher. Let me share with you the sixth and perhaps most revealing sign of a foolish person. One that manifests in every conversation, every meeting, and every relationship. Have you ever been in a conversation where you couldn't get a word in? Where the other person's monologue felt like an endless stream of self-promotion and interruption? That's exactly what we're going to explore today. The ancient Stoic philosopher Epictetus once said, "We have 2 ears and 1 mouth, so that we can listen twice as much as we speak." This profound observation gets to the heart of our discussion. I remember a pivotal moment in my career when I worked with John, a senior executive at a Fortune 500 company. John was brilliant. His resume sparkled with achievements. His technical knowledge was impeccable, but he had a fatal flaw that was destroying his team's morale and productivity. In every meeting, John would dominate the conversation. His team members would attempt to share their insights or raise concerns, but John would swiftly interrupt, launching into lengthy explanations about why his approach was superior. He'd spend 20 minutes responding to a 5-second question, not because the answer required it, but because he couldn't resist showcasing his knowledge. Marcus Aurelius writes in his Meditations, "Be silent, or let thy words be worth more than silence." John's inability to embrace this wisdom was costing him dearly. His team began withholding critical information, knowing they'd never get a chance to fully explain their ideas. Innovation stagnated. Talented employees started leaving. The turning point came during a crucial project review. A junior engineer tried to warn about a serious technical flaw, but John, true to form, interrupted with a lengthy discourse about his past successes. 2 weeks later, the project failed spectacularly, exactly as the engineer had tried to warn. This brings us to a fundamental truth about intelligence. It's not just about what you know, but how well you can learn from others. Seneca emphasized this when he said, "The greatest obstacle to living is expectancy, which hangs upon tomorrow and loses today." Think about your own conversations. When someone's speaking, are you truly listening, or are you just waiting for your turn to talk? Are you formulating your response while they're still speaking, missing crucial details in the process? The problem with excessive talking isn't just about monopolizing conversation. It's about what we miss when we're focused on our own voice. Every interruption is a missed opportunity to learn. Every monologue, a barrier to genuine connection. Here's what I've learned from studying both Stoic philosophy and modern psychology. True wisdom often manifests in the ability to create space for others. It's about understanding that every person you meet knows something you don't. Let me share a practical framework I've developed for cultivating this wisdom. First, practice the 3-cat rule. After someone finishes speaking, wait 3 full seconds before responding. This simple pause accomplishes 2 things. It ensures they've finished their thought, and it gives you time to truly process what they've said. Second, adopt what I call curious listening. Instead of thinking about your response, focus on understanding what's beneath the words. What emotions, what concerns, what hopes are being expressed. Third, implement the 2-question principle. Before sharing your perspective, ask at least 2 questions about what the other person has said. This forces you to engage with their ideas rather than just waiting to share your own. I've seen this framework transform relationships, both professional and personal. One of my clients, a CEO known for his aggressive communication style, saw his team's performance improve by 40% after implementing these principles. More importantly, he reported feeling more connected to his team and family. Remember, as Epictetus taught us, it is impossible for a man to learn what he thinks he already knows. Every time you choose to listen rather than speak, you're creating an opportunity for growth. But here's the challenging part. This isn't just about technique. It's about fundamentally shifting how you view conversations. Instead of seeing them as opportunities to demonstrate your knowledge, view them as chances to expand it. The most profound conversations I've had in my life weren't the ones where I spoke the most, but the ones where I listened deeply enough to be changed by what I heard. Take a moment now to reflect. In your last significant conversation, what percentage of the time did you spend talking versus listening? What insights might you have missed while planning your next point? The path to wisdom isn't always about gaining more knowledge. Sometimes it's about creating the silence necessary to absorb the knowledge that's already around us. As Marcus Aurelius reminded us, the soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. What color are your conversations painting? Remember, the wise person listens to understand, while the fool listens to reply. Which one will you choose to be? Let's transition to our final thoughts about these 6 signs. But first, I want you to consider this. The quality of your life is often directly proportional to the quality of your listening. What might change if you started treating every conversation as an opportunity to learn rather than an opportunity to prove you're right? Conclusion. The journey to wisdom. As we come to the end of our exploration of these 6 signs, I want to share something profound that Marcus Aurelius once wrote. The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. Think about that for a moment. What color are you choosing for your soul today? We've journeyed through the signs of a closed mind. Constant blaming, arrogance over humility, lack of empathy, fear of change, and talking more than listening. But here's what's truly important. Recognizing these signs isn't about judging others. It's about illuminating our own path to growth. You see, wisdom isn't a destination. It's a journey. Each of these signs is like a lantern, showing us not just where we might stumble, but also where we have the opportunity to grow stronger. As Seneca wisely noted, while we wait for life, life passes. The time to begin this transformation is now. Think about it. Every person you've ever admired for their wisdom started exactly where you are now. They faced the same challenges, the same doubts, the same struggles. The only difference? They chose to embrace growth over comfort, learning over certainty. Your presence here, your willingness to examine these signs and reflect on your own behavior, that already sets you apart. That's the first step toward wisdom. And it's one that many never take. Remember, true intelligence isn't about being perfect. It's about being aware. It's about choosing to grow, one decision at a time, one interaction at a time, one day at a time. If you've found value in these insights, if something here has resonated with your own journey, I invite you to be part of our growing community of seekers and learners. Take a moment to subscribe to this channel, where we explore more of these life-changing philosophical insights and practical wisdom. And here's something special I'd like you to do. Share your biggest takeaway in the comments below with the phrase, "Wisdom is," followed by your personal insight. Your perspective might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. Give this video a thumbs up if you're committed to your journey of growth. This simple action helps share these valuable insights with others who might be searching for the same wisdom you've found here today. Remember, as Epictetus taught us, no great thing is created suddenly. Your journey to wisdom is a daily choice, a continuous commitment to growth and understanding. Thank you for joining me on this exploration of wisdom and foolishness. Until next time, keep reflecting, keep growing, and most importantly, keep choosing wisdom over foolishness. The light of understanding is always brightest when we share it with others. Take care, and I'll see you in our next journey of discovery.